A strategic Russian enterprise is on fire. Ukrainian drones have reached a factory that produces batteries for missiles. Ukraine has ratified the agreement on a special tribunal for the aggressor. Trump gives Putin an ultimatum and promises Ukraine millions in weapons. Europe is preparing for a major war. Poland is sending out draft notices for medical commissions, while Germany promises to destroy Russians. She returned to Russia. And she regretted it. A black Russian woman from the States is suffering from severe racism in Russia. Hello, my name is Anastasia Dmitry, and right now, here are the main stories. But first, like this video if you support Ukraine, and subscribe to our channel so we don't lose each other on YouTube. So what's happening in the fourth year of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine? The special military operation is still going according to plan.
It was approximately 3 minutes ago, just a short while before now. It also flew in that direction.
In fact, Russians in the Lipetsk, Voronezh and Rostov regions complained about drone attacks. Meanwhile, in the Russian city of Yelets and elsewhere in the Lipetsk region, the energy enterprise which produces batteries and accumulators, including for missiles, came under attack. It hasn't even been fully built yet. And maybe these windows were blown up? Yes. Or maybe, they were breaking the glass? Regarding the situation at the front, in the Sumy direction, Ukraine's defense forces are advancing in the area of Kindrativka in the Kotin community, while in the east of the Zaporizhzhia region near Huliaipol, Russian troops are making advances. In addition, the Russians have intensified military logistics through Mariupol. Subdistrict station. New freight cars have arrived. Not empty, probably with imported BCs. The unloaded cargo is currently being stored on the territory of the former rubber factory, where the Russians have another base. Mariupol port. A vessel that could have brought BC has been identified. They have also started clearing the fairway here to allow the passage of large deadweight vessels. The Verkhovna Rada has ratified an agreement with the Council of Europe, which provides for the creation of a special tribunal regarding the crime of aggression by Russia against Ukraine. In fact, MP from the Holos party Yaroslav Jelezniak reported that 323 members of parliament voted in favor. The ratification of this agreement is a very important step, as the future special tribunal will allow investigations against the highest leadership of the Russian Federation, which is usually protected by personal immunity. At the same time, it is important to note that verdicts will only be possible after the loss of office. In addition, today the Verkhovna Rada voted to suspend the Convention on the Prohibition of the Use of Anti-Personnel Mines for Ukraine. Meanwhile, as MP from Holos Roman Kostenko says, Russia is not a party to this convention and uses mines on a massive scale every day against Ukrainian soldiers and civilians. The Verkhovna Rada has just voted to suspend the Ottawa Convention for Ukraine. This is a historic decision that restores our right to use and produce anti-personnel mines, an important element of engineering defense on the battlefield. We've finally been waiting for this. Yesterday, US President Donald Trump made a previously announced important statement regarding Russia.
I'm disappointed in Putin because I thought we would reach an agreement 2 months ago.
In addition to expressing his dissatisfaction, Trump also issued an ultimatum to Putin, saying that Russia has 50 days to reconcile, and if not, Russia will find out what US sanctions wrath really means.
We will impose very strict tariffs if we don't reach a peace agreement within 50 days.
Donald also spoke about aid to Ukraine, including the supply of Patriot air defense systems. These Patriots are
everything that's needed. They will arrive in Ukraine very soon. Some will arrive in just a few days.
In addition, the Times writes that Zelensky has gained an unexpected ally. At the White House, they're talking about Melania Trump. How did you break this news? To Putin, that is? How did you inform Putin about this?
I talked to him a lot about resolving this issue. And I always hang up thinking, well, that was a pleasant phone conversation. and then missiles are launched at Kyiv or some other city. And I said, it's strange. And after this happens 3 or 4 times, you realize these conversations mean nothing. My conversations with him are always very pleasant. They say these are very nice conversations, and then at night they launch missiles. I go home and tell the First Lady, you know, I spoke with Volodymyr today, we had a great conversation. She says, oh, really? Just one more place, just to make it clear.
Back in February 2022, Melania Trump publicly supported Ukraine and called the killing of peaceful Ukrainians horrific and tragic, even though at that time Donald Trump was praising Putin and calling him smart and brilliant. Melania Trump addressed her followers, urging them to help Ukraine, in particular by donating money to the Red Cross. Mrs. Melania has continued to support Ukraine even while holding the status of First Lady of the United States. But let's get back to Trump's statements. Specifically, to the statements about supplying weapons. In fact, the intention to provide Ukraine with weapons was also confirmed by NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte at the meeting where Trump made his statements.
Boris Pistorius, Minister of Defense of Germany, and we will also discuss this whole issue regarding Patriot. Norway is also involved. So this concerns Patriot, but the agreement also includes missiles and ammunition. So it's broader than just Patriot.
We have one country that has 17 Patriots ready to be sent. They won't need them. So we're going to make a deal where 17 or a significant portion of those 17 will go to the war in Ukraine.
Rutte also spoke about negotiations with Russia, or more precisely, about the composition of the Russian delegation. The head of NATO believes that the Russian side of the negotiations is led by, well, a very strange person.
Ukraine had a serious delegation, while the Russians sent some historian who talked about the history of Russia from the year 1250.
At the very same time, there is important information coming from Politico that Donald Trump does not truly believe in Ukraine's ultimate victory.
The president believes that Russia will win. The only question is how much time it will take, said a senior White House official.
In this context, the term "in 50 days" also looks interesting. Because on the 3rd of July, Putin informed Trump that he plans to fully occupy the Zaporizhia, Kherson, Donetsk and Luhansk regions within 60 days. And yesterday, that is literally 10 days later, Trump gives Putin 50 days to make a deal with Ukraine. You have to agree, it looks strange. Strange enough that even the Washington Post writes that Trump gave Putin a gift. And if we add to this the news about the offensive that Russia is preparing for the second half of the summer, we can assume that the next 2 months will be very difficult. But let's get back to Russia. Because Trump's statements are not only about dissatisfaction, but also about being tired of Putin's lies and anger at Russia. I
Keep listening to him, and after talking to him, I say it was a great conversation, and then missiles fly at Kyiv or other cities and kill people. After this happens 3 or 4 times, you realize that these conversations are empty.
Although that didn't stop Trump from once again saying that he won't be fooled. Oh, and of course, there was the promise to end the war.
Putin is a tough guy. He has fooled
Many. Clinton, Bush,
Obama, Biden, but not me.
One way or another, despite all the nuances, Trump's statement is generally seen as a positive one. This was stated in particular by the US representative to the NATO alliance, Matthew Whitaker.
Trump sent a clear and loud signal to Putin. We gave you a chance for peace. Trump the peacemaker. But if you want war, then Europe will pay for it.
In the Kremlin, unexpectedly, Trump's statements were taken seriously. At least that's what Putin's press secretary, Dmitry,
The individual being referred to here is Peskov, a notable figure whose name is central to this discussion. I genuinely wouldn't want to run too far ahead of ourselves, and let's patiently wait for the results to properly come into play and not to minister prematurely.
do you think the Kremlin really takes these statements seriously? Are they just pretending to take it seriously?
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
But fundamentally, and it's worth acknowledging, there has been a rather sharp change in rhetoric. Trump is indeed voicing criticism of Russia. In particular, the Russians are already actively preparing for attacks by Ukrainian drones. In fact, some companies in Moscow City are switching their employees to remote work. According to information from free sources cited by Ostorozhno Media, some companies are sending employees to work from home, fearing that drones might attack the city within the next 2 weeks. At the same time, it's possible that remote work could be extended until the end of the summer. In some organizations, lists are being compiled of those employees who still need to come to their workplaces in the city. At the same time, some companies have concluded that the threat is not that serious, and restrictions on employees visiting offices will only apply at night. From midnight to 8 a.m., Russian military bloggers are also writing that the armed forces of Ukraine will start striking deep into Russian rear areas. Strikes in the direction of Moscow and Tatarstan. The enemy is planning to attempt strikes on deep rear regions in the direction of Moscow and Tatarstan, using between 300 and 700 drones, the Storm missile forces, Neptune anti-ship missiles, and other long-range missiles. During air raid alerts, we observe precautionary measures. To be fair, it should be noted that recently Trump asked Zelensky why Ukraine doesn't strike at the Russian capital. At that time, Zelensky said that Ukraine would strike Moscow if its partners provided weapons. According to the Financial Times, during a private conversation, Trump urged Zelensky to intensify strikes deeper into Russia. Supposedly, only pain will force the Russians to come to the negotiating table. And what do you think, will Ukraine actually start launching massive attacks deep into Russian territory? It seems that Europe has shifted from a policy of deep concern to a new approach. If you want peace, prepare for war. In fact, in recent months, there has been a trend in the EU where they act more than they talk. And here you have real actions. The Polish newspaper Wyborcza reports that in Poland, draft notices for military medical commissions are now being sent out en masse. Approximately 235,000 Poles will receive summonses to appear before the military commission. These summonses will start being sent to recipients beginning in January of next year, and the period of military qualification will last from the 2nd of February to the 30th of April 2026, except for public holidays. They will be delivered with a notice of receipt. Meanwhile, German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius recently spoke with journalists from the Financial Times. And there, in particular, he stated that if Russia attacks a NATO country, German troops are ready to destroy Russian soldiers. According to him, this year's establishment of a permanent brigade of German soldiers in Lithuania to protect the Baltic state, one of Pistorius's flagship projects, has become a vivid symbol of Germany's commitment. NATO, nearly 4 decades after the fall of the Iron Curtain. The British, Americans and French were in Germany to protect our eastern flank, he said. And today, Lithuania, the Baltic countries and Poland are the eastern flank, and we must make our contribution there. He insisted that the German troops, who for years have had a culture of military restraint in response to the horrors of World War II, would be ready to kill Russian soldiers if Moscow attacked a NATO member state. Estonia, meanwhile, recently conducted its first live-fire exercises with HIMARS, and the Russians clearly did not like it. And the Kremlin issued an angry statement about aggressive policies and provocative actions. From Tallinn, France is also preparing for a large-scale war in Europe by 2030. In particular, this is stated in the Strategic National Review for 2025. It mentions the growing threat of war and high-intensity conflict beyond its own territory, in which both France and its allies could be involved. Meanwhile, the main threat identified in the document is Russia, which is mentioned more than 80 times. And what do you think? Could Russia really launch a war against NATO countries in the coming years? Russia will only continue to build up its military potential, and within the next 5 years will be ready to attack NATO. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte said this in an interview with New York Times journalist. In addition, Rutte stated that China could persuade Russia to attack NATO territory. Rutte believes that if Chinese leader Xi Jinping decides to attack Taiwan, he will first call his partner, Russian ruler Vladimir Putin, asking him to distract NATO's attention. He will say to Putin, "Hey, I'm about to do this and I need you to distract them." In Europe, by attacking NATO territory. Rutte says that this scenario is the most likely, so the alliance must already be preparing for the possibility that Russia will carry it out. And to deter them, we need to do two things. First, NATO must be so strong that the Russians would never dare to do it. Second, we need to cooperate with the Indo-Pacific region. This is something President Trump is actively promoting because we have close ties and joint work in the defense industry and innovation between NATO and the Indo-Pacific region. How realistic do you think it is that Russia will actually carry out this scenario? Meanwhile, Putin continues to fill the mobilization fund with cannon fodder. Well, in Russia itself, they have already started to forcibly conscript not just those convicted, but even those merely suspected of offenses. For the slightest infraction, the police grab a person and then the repressive machine is set in motion. There is no choice voluntarily by force or simply straight from the police station. The suspect Vanka ends up at the front. More details in the following report.
A bonus for recruiting suspects. In Russia, police officers can get a decent bonus to their salary if they persuade a detainee to sign up. To sign a contract, for each person recruited for the special military operation, they pay a bonus of up to 100,000 rubles.
Bro, your life is already shit anyway. You just smoked some salt, so maybe at least you'll die for your country. I sobered him up even before the draft office. I dunked his head in the sink to bring him to his senses. And then we left. A district police officer from Kaluga.
According to the Russian outlet Verstka, for the number of children each person sent to war has been under suspicion, at least since August of last year. District officers, operatives and investigators in many regions of Russia are being paid money. A district officer from Kaluga said that those he sent to war, to Ukraine, would have died in the near future, even in peacetime. But this way, at least they served their motherland and he earned money.
I only sent 3 guys, but honestly, they were the kind of guys who would have died within a year anyway. What kind? Drugs? They were all already registered anyway. A long time ago, we had an order from the deputy chief to motivate antisocial elements to sign up for contract service. Later, they started paying bonuses for it. We use this as a tool to get rid of unpleasant elements who mess up our statistics. Each of the 2 regular district officers sends out 12 to 15 people a month. The district officer from Kaluga.
In the spring of 2024, the Russian Federation amended the Criminal Procedure Code. Now, all detainees over 18 and under 65 years old, they are informed that they have the right not only to a lawyer and the right not to testify against themselves, but also the right to go to the special military operation instead of facing trial. In other words, to become a soldier rather than a defendant in a criminal case.
The suspension of the criminal process. That is, if he agrees before the first interrogation and the military enlistment office signs the contract, there will be no further investigation, no trial, nothing. The investigation stops. The case will be considered indefinitely suspended.
Each region has its own rate. In Moscow and Leningrad, they pay 50,000 for each person recruited. In Rostov and the region, before the new year, they paid 15,000, now it's already 60,000. In the Bryansk region, it's 20,000 to 30,000 rubles. Most often, those suspected of theft and crimes related to possession and distribution of drugs agreed to go to the front. Just in the month of June this year, 3,333 detainees across Russia were offered to go to war. 2,200 people refused to sign the contract, while 392 agreed, which is almost 12%. 500 people. There are also 741 more Russians who were offered to sign a contract by the police. The result is unknown.
It's mostly drug addicts who go to the front, that is, those charged under Article 228, and those who already have several convictions, also thieves. In the winter, almost all the drug addicts left us those caught with possession or dealing. They face long sentences. Serious charges are paid. Even the lawyers themselves, they hope for a contract. A police officer from Krasnodar.
But things aren't so sweet for criminals who already have one foot in prison. And here they're offered a so-called lucky ticket to freedom, or more precisely, to the special military operation. The criminal case is only suspended, not closed. And it can be closed if the detainee returns from Ukraine with a disability or with a significant award. Journalists from the publication simply haven't found any such cases since last spring,
Considering all the intricate facets and potential ramifications, the fundamental question that arises is whether, in a given scenario, it would be a more strategically sound and ultimately beneficial decision to unequivocally decline the terms and conditions of a proposed contractual agreement, thereby accepting the inevitable consequence of serving a predetermined period of punitive incarceration or a comparable form of legal penalty, all the while ensuring one's continued existence and physical well-being, as opposed to acceding to the contract and potentially facing a different set of challenges or risks that might jeopardize one's life or freedom in a more profound manner. This inquiry delves into the profound ethical and practical considerations of choosing between a difficult but survivable path of legal consequence and an alternative that might offer immediate relief but carry greater long-term existential threats. It forces a contemplation of the value of life and liberty when confronted with a binding agreement that could dictate one's future.
Or die somewhere in the fields of Ukraine, or come back disabled. And even then, there's no guarantee that the criminal case won't be reopened.
We can talk a lot about Russians to describe just how they are, but no one can speak about them better than they can themselves. In short, here's a story for you. A black Russian woman who grew up in the States decided to return to her homeland. The main motivation for her return was that in the States she experienced unbearable racism and police arbitrariness.
I feel free living in Russia because in Russia, no matter what time of day it is, I can go outside and feel safe.
Yes, the Russian television channel RT even made a propaganda film about this woman. And all of it is done in the best traditions of Russian propaganda. Everyone else is bad, Russia is good. But already in her own family, the woman holding her 2-year-old child was beaten by her racist Russian neighbors.
I keep yelling at the neighbors. Today I was in tears. They hit me right in the face with a fist. So, have you been living in Russia for a long time? Do you have a residence permit? Let me go back to my apartment. I live here legally, just like you. Let me go back to my apartment.
Meanwhile, the Russian police just shrug their shoulders.
I go to the police station, file a report. I have a Russian passport. They basically don't respond or help.
Well, what can I say? I'm absolutely not surprised. Russia. That's Russia for you. Please like this video to support what we do. And be sure to subscribe to our channel Ukraine Today so you don't miss our next episodes. See you soon!